Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zamantung Mbegi, and I'll be the program director for the event today. The event today is named the launch of the SAHRC, the South African Human Rights Commission, July 2021 Unrest report, the launch for the Gauteng province. Before we start, I would like to request that we all stand, or bow our heads in respect of those who lost their lives during this tragic event. Thank you. Vice-Chancellor of the Tshwane University of Technology, Commissioner Madlingozi, members of the student community, and members of the affected communities. The South African Human Rights Commission and Tshwane University of Technology welcome you to the launch of this report in Gauteng. In 2021, the unrest engulfed both Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. And as a result, the SAHRC, as well as the CRL Commission, as part of its mandate, held hearings to better understand what happened during the month of July in 2021. Two reports were issued, one by the CRL Commission and one by the South African Human Rights Commission, with findings and recommendations. Without wasting more time, let me call the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tinigo Maluleke, to welcome us and provide the contextual remarks for the program today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and welcome to the People's University. That's what we are called, and rightfully so. The Tshwane University of Technology is home to more than 60,000 students. It is by far the largest contact university in the country, and arguably one of the most complex, in the sense that we have at least 7 campuses around Pretoria, and a campus in Polokwane, a campus in Mbombela, another one in Emalahleni. So that is quite a footprint. The only other university with that kind of footprint is UNISA, but UNISA is not a university, as you know. It is an OD institution, ODL institution, not contact as such. Commissioner Tsepo Matingozi, it is really a special occasion for me to welcome you to this university. A few years ago, you and I were in the trenches at another university. So it's good to bring you here and for you and I to meet in this context. The SA Human Rights Commission is one of the most important institutions in our democracy, perhaps the most important if you think about it, because what is more important than human rights in a democracy? And that body that is mandated to take care of human rights must rank among the most important, because we can shout all we like about being a democratic country. Without human rights, we can't be democratic. I also recognize in our midst Dirk Swart, also from the South African Human Rights Commission. I see that they didn't put any titles in front of the names of people. I should assume they are all doctors, just in case I get into trouble by calling a doctor something else. I also have Zamantu Mwambegi, I think she's the program director, also from the HRC. Wisani Baloi, Martina Hunter Personage, Bongo Ekumete, and the Middlelands Community Forum, Ndombenke Ngwane, Sandra from the Middlelands Community Forum, Notamsanga Namela, Nomzamo Zondo, Tsepo Kutumela, Temba Makuvela, and from TUT I have several people here. Dr. Banubai is sitting there. Papama is probably the lady you have been speaking to, and her team of hardworking members of the communication and marketing team at TUT. The registrar of the university is here, Dr. Msha Tony. If you can raise your hand, thank you very much. The executive director for student affairs, Dr. Ntangeni, is here. And yeah, if I didn't mention your name, it's because you are more important than the people I mentioned. That is normally how it works. The SRC is here, the ISRC is here, the General Secretary is here, the Saro General, that's a very important title, is here. And where is the president of the ISRC? He's not here. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope to speak for just 10 minutes, hopefully less. I think we know the backstory to the July 2021 unrest. It was 27 years since the dawn of democracy in South Africa. The country was at that time living under the shadow of COVID-19, as well as living under the exacerbating economic situation that had already been dire for several years. But in July 2021, we were by no means out of the woods. To survive the dark COVID period, ordinary South Africans relied on the battery of COVID-19 social grants that were quickly invented to deal with that situation. Unfortunately, some of these were looted by the corrupt. For psychological nourishment, I want to suggest that, because that was a very stressful time in our country, I want to suggest that for psychological nourishment, ordinary South Africans also relied on Master KG's Jerusalema, as well as the music of the likes of Caspar Nyovest, Kabza De Small, DJ Maporisa, and others. It was during that time when the only way we could feel across the street and socialize in distance was through listening to music. Then in the midst of all of that, boom, for 8 days in July, from July 8 to July 15th, 2021, KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng exploded into what President Cyril Ramaphosa, recalling the controversial book of Joseph Conrad, described as the heart of darkness. I don't want to debate the appropriateness of that metaphor, given what the heart of darkness was all about. But for former President Mbeki, the July 2021 riots were nothing but, and I quote him, a counter-revolutionary insurgency that has long been germinating in the bowels of what we commonly call state capture. End of quote. And this rioting and looting happens in the middle of a pandemic that should ordinarily have restricted the movement and the gathering of large numbers of people. The people whom President Ramaphosa often serenaded in a yodeling funereal voice at the so-called family meetings as my fellow South Africans were suddenly possessed by a spirit of bedlam, so that they pillaged their country and murdered one another in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. These are the same people of Phoenix and Inanda, among whom the saintly Mahatma Gandhi lived in 1904. Did the principles of nonviolent resistance escape the people amongst whom Gandhi lived? What with the fact that on August 6, 1985, the same people of Phoenix and Inanda erupted into racialized violence in 2 days of mayhem, after which more than 1,000 families were affected and displaced, while 3 people lost their lives. And to these add to these the infamous 1949 Durban riots, which is a code for the African versus Indian riots, which took place in that year and took more than 140 lives. The same people whom only 2 decades ago were being described by Desmond Tutu as the rainbow people of God. Where did the rainbow people go in July 2021? What happened to the people who had apparently chosen the path of peace, which the late Alistair Sparks described as a negotiated revolution, instead of the path of violence? What happened to the July's people referred to in the report of the Human Rights Commission? People who, in the face of a crisis, found new forms of social cohesion and new ways of relating to one another, a people about whom Nadine Gordimer wrote in 1981 in her novel of the same title. I like the fact that in that book there's a character called Nico. The only thing missing is Nico, is the T-I. But at least there was a Nico in that novel of Nadine Gordimer about a people who were looking for ways to reach out to one another, black and white, during a time of crisis. What happened to that streak, that spirit? What had happened to the people whose achievement of freedom was so magnificent and so ethical that former President Mandela saw at his inauguration, and I quote, that the sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. One could have been forgiven for starting to wonder whether the sun was beginning to set on our democracy. Whether this was the beginning of the Francis Guyama moment, that is, the end of history as we had known it until then. You see, the great frame and flow of our history was supposed to be like this. After colonialism and apartheid, or rather, after a revolution of Fanonian proportions had displaced colonialism and apartheid, we would then move to some kind of interregnum that Antonio Gramsci wrote about. And then after that, freedom would come. And after freedom, there would be joy, peace, and happiness. But the interregnum lingered longer than we had imagined. That is the space in between. You know, the way he described it was, the old is dying, but the new is refusing to be born. We stayed in that state for too long. And in the middle of that, the insatiable horse called corruption came galloping to join up with unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And so we ask all these questions. What happened to the rainbow people? We should remember that just over a month after the July riots, on 31 August 2021, 5-year-old Eli Nyembe fell into a pit latrine in Durban and died, just like Michael Komape had done several years earlier, and just like many more South African kids have done, falling into one of these 3,000 pit latrines at schools and crèches across our country. This should make us ask what happened to the sun that was supposed to never set. Indeed, when Unrest was killed in Vicksburg, and when miners were killed in Marikana, when innocent South African lives were sacrificed in the Life Acid Dimeni saga, we should ask what happened to the rainbow that we were chasing. When VBS looting, the looting of the money of the poor and the vulnerable, when COVID corruption happened, even as people were dying, we should ask ourselves indeed what has happened to the notion of a rainbow nation. Now there's a famous, and I'm just concluding now, there's a famous trending video of Ngozi Adichie, Chimamanda Ngozi's, the great writer from Nigeria, The Danger of a Single Story. And that is the danger that we have to avoid every time. How do we interpret this? We can't find a single angle through which we will describe and understand what happened in July 2021. It can't be reduced to one single cause and one single dimension. And that was my concluding, reading the Human Rights Commission report. And I look forward to hearing more reflections from the commissioners themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vice Chancellor. Indeed, there is a danger to a one-sided story, and to provide reflections on the Commission's story, or reflections on of the Commission on the anniversary of the July unrest. Please help me welcome Commissioner Tsepo Madlingozi. Thank you.
Good morning, Vice Chancellor. Good morning, the Register. Good morning, Director of Student Affairs. Most important, good morning to all of you who are here, especially our community partners who did participate in our hearings. It's good that you are able to be here with us to hear our progress update, but also to hold us accountable for the work that we are doing. I want to first start by thanking the VC for very readily and enthusiastically accepting our proposal to have this launch, to thank your marketing team for working very, very well with our team to make this day happen. I also want to thank Ms. Mbeki, our provincial manager, Martina Bongiwe, the team from the Gauteng province for this launch. It is indeed a wonderful moment to have this launch. We did have a launch in KwaZulu-Natal, as you know, in January the 29th, but we thought that there is a bias when we talk about the unrest to focus only on KwaZulu-Natal, and that it was important that we also have a launch here in Gauteng. So that's why we are having this launch in Gauteng. Welcome to all the speakers who will be with us today. It's also good to see Ms. Zondo, the director of the Social Economic Rights Institute. I can brag to say that I was on the founding board of SAHRC, and SAHRC has since taken off under the wonderful leadership of Mrs. Zondo. Thank you, and continue to do the good work. Indeed, VC, you and I come a long way. It was almost 8 years ago when we were deep in the trenches of Fees Must Fall. Next year, it will be the 10th year anniversary of Fees Must Fall. We'll remember the students were raising a number of issues. It's a mistake just to say that the issues were issues to do with Asinamali, issues to do with fees. For us, two important arguments came up during Fees Must Fall. One, you will remember students were saying, in these universities, we don't see ourselves when we look at the curriculum is still Eurocentric. We feel very alienated. We should reflect whether today our universities, including TVETs and other colleges, whether indeed students do see themselves reflected in the curriculum, in the staff complement, in the statues, in the building, in the culture of the universities. But secondly, students were saying something very, very important. They were saying that universities are a microcosm of society, and as such, they continue to be bedeviled by institutionalized racism, homophobia, sexism, xenophobia, and ableism, institutionalized. In other ways, they continue to be colonized spaces. So what the students were asking was a question that was posed by Solomon Chekiso Plagi, the first Secretary General of the ANC in 1916. You'll remember his famous book, Vice Chancellor, Native Life in South Africa. What is native life in South Africa? And that book, of course, opens with the famous words, awakening in, can't remember the month now, 1913, the native finds himself not as a slave, but as a pariah in the land of his forefathers. A pariah, a stranger, the other in his country. 30 years into democracy, VC, this question still comes up. Are the majority of people in South Africa still pariahs? Or do they enjoy a sense of belonging 30 years into democracy? From our side as a Human Rights Commission, from the complaints that we attend to, from the monitoring visits that we make, from the seminars, workshops that we attend to, and from the hearings that we conduct, we sadly conclude that the majority still feel like pariahs in the land of their birth. Abahlali baseMjondolo, which is the Sheikh Dwellers movement from KwaZulu-Natal, but with a national footprint, talk about a state of unfreedom, a state of unfreedom. So every year on the 27th of April, when the rest of us celebrate Freedom Day, they host what they call We Mourn an Unfreedom, a state of unfreedom. A state of unfreedom is a liminal space between colonialism and post-colonialism, the intergram that we are talking about, VC, a liminal stage, an unfreedom. It would be silly for us to say South Africa is still under apartheid. I hope we don't have radical decolonialists like Ms. Mbeki here, Ms. Zondo, who are radical decolonialists. But you can't say today is still a colonial society. I'm joking. Zondo doesn't say that. It's not a colonial society. But at the same time, it would be unfair to say we are in a post-colonial society, a post-apartheid society. So Abahlali is quite correct when they say we are in a state of unfreedom, this in-between state, this liminal state, where the majority of citizens and other people who find themselves in South Africa continue to be pushed to the underside of society, where their voices and their lives don't count, where their death is ungrievable lives, as Naomi Klein put it. So for us as a Human Rights Commission, this 30 years of democracy is not a moment to celebrate, but it's a moment to enter into a deep reflection, to say, how do we realize the promises and the dreams of 1984, actually, with the UDF and the other civic movement, where there was this sense that we are working towards a South Africa where everyone will have a sense of belonging. For us, part of that reflection is a need for a new reflection on what we mean by human rights, a new understanding of human rights, what you can call a decolonized understanding of human rights. That we cannot still say that human rights is a textbook by textbook definition, individual entitlements that people have. That's a Eurocentric idea, individual understanding of human rights. For us, human rights should be understood not from an individualized perspective, but from a collective interdependence perspective. So 3 proposals. The first proposal that we are coming up with is that there is no human rights enjoyment without social harmony, right? This is an Ubuntu understanding of human rights, not individual claims, but a sense of collective interdependence. So the first proposal, or the first thesis, is that there is no human rights without social harmony, an Ubuntu understanding of human rights. This sense of we-ness. So as we reflect today on the anniversary of the July Unrest, but 30 years into democracy, have we built this sense of we-ness, this sense of collective nation building? What happened to that project of nation building? Secondly, the second thesis is that to be a truly post-colonial society where everyone enjoys human rights, we should work towards a sense of both material and affective belonging. Everyone must feel a sense of belongingness in South Africa. We can't claim that we have a sense of belonging for all of us. A lot of people still don't feel that they belong to this new South Africa. How do we build that sense of collective belonging? Number 3, therefore, that enjoins all of us, Vice Chancellor, that we don't just attend to individual violations of human rights, as we have done for a long time as a Human Rights Commission and other civil society groups. That yes, individual complaints and violations must be attended to, but that only focuses on the symptom of the problem. What is at the root of these constant violations of human rights? This normalized social injustice. What is at the root, not at the symptom level? We want to propose that at the root cause is a failure to fully decolonize society in 1994. Democratization, extension of civil rights without decolonization. Democracy without decolonization. So it is not enough, Ms. Zondo and Vice Chancellor, that we've got socio-economic rights for poor people and for the elite, BEE, and affirmative action. We need a new understanding of human rights and social justice that centralizes what I call the 3 R's of decolonization: reparation, redress, redistribution. Reparation, redress, restitution, and so forth. Where is that agenda of reparation today? There is no new society without reparation. There is no new society without redistribution. Individual enjoyment of socio-economic rights within available resources are okay, but we need to start talking about reparation. So, Vice Chancellor, our report focuses a lot on social cohesion, social harmony. But we are very clear that there is no social cohesion, there is no social harmony unless there is reparation, redress, restitution. Otherwise, we continue to make the mistakes that we've made for the past 30 years, Vice Chancellor, which is to say, please hug, we are a new society, forgive each other, and let's move on. Without reparations, without the middle class, without beneficiaries of apartheid losing anything. There can't be social cohesion without reparation. So this is why in 2021, as a Human Rights Commission, we got involved with this unrest. People always ask us, why did you get involved with this unrest? Why did you get involved with this unrest? It's because we understand that there is no enjoyment of human rights without peace, social harmony, based on these values of reparation and redistribution. So what did we do when the unrest happened? The first thing that we did in July 2021 was to host a national imbizo, a virtual national imbizo. That imbizo was attended by about 800 people, where we invited members of the community, civil society organizations, state officials, to reflect about what is happening, what has happened in these past 8 days. This was after the unrest. What has happened as a society? Because no one was doing anything. I was honored to be one of the facilitators of that imbizo while I was still at CARS. The Human Rights Commission invited me. And it was very clear from that imbizo that people were saying the project of nation building has failed. The project of nation building has failed, and we need to do better. And the second thing that people said was that we need a national hearing to go to the root cause of the issues. So this is how the national hearings came about from that national imbizo, organically bottom-up, called for by members of the community. So we held hearings in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng for almost a year and a half, a year. The third thing that we did was, while we were still doing the hearings, while we were still undertaking the hearings, a consistent theme that came up was this idea that we will have this unrest over and over again. By the way, VC, the so-called African-Indian conflict that happened in KwaZulu-Natal has happened every 30 years on the dot. July, it was the third one. It has happened just like that. This was the third time. I don't know if we are cursed or what, but there is that cycle in KwaZulu-Natal. So people were saying we need some sort of another understanding of each other. So the third thing that we did as a Human Rights Commission was to come up with an initiative that we call Shine Initiative, the social harmony through national effort. Shine project. Ms. Ngwane will talk more in details about that project. Because we understood that we can have hearings, we can have recommendations, there can be criminal prosecutions, but without us understanding each other as communities, these things will happen over and over again. So we have a permanent initiative called Social Harmony, where we are strengthening communities in social dialogue. VC, I won't summarize the report. Martina will do that in terms of the key findings of the report. But our reflections 2 years later is twofold. Our first reflection is that we are once again warning VC that there is a risk of recurrence of what happened in 21. There is that risk of a recurrence. There's a risk because the causes of that July 2021 unrest, as the VC so articulately outlined them, are still with us. The causes are still with us. The causes of impoverishment of a large sectors of society. The fact that most people don't feel a sense of belonging. The trust deficit between the state and the population, that trust deficit, that leadership vacuum is still there. The lack of coordination between different sectors of the justice, the criminal justice cluster, it is still there. So the first reflection that we are bringing about is that the risk of occurrence is still there. The second reflection, VC, is a disappointment. In our report, we have a lot of clear recommendations to attend to the systemic causes of this unrest. We name about 9 state institutions and private institutions that should attend to these recommendations, about 9 of them. We gave them 90 days to come back to us to say how are they implementing these recommendations. I regret to inform you, VC, that out of those 9 institutions, only 2 of them came back to us with substantive answers. So we are disappointed in our own state that our own state is either very slow to attend to our recommendations or they are unwilling to attend to those recommendations. As a Human Rights Commission, we need to say this publicly because we account to you as the members of the public. It's not just naming and shaming, it is to tell you what is happening. The Department of Justice came back to us and they've asked for an extension, and we've given them that extension. The presidency, after a long time, came back to us to also now ask for an extension because the security services, sits in the presidency. The SAHRC, which is a regulator for private security, only came back to us disputing some of our findings. So our second reflection is to say that there is an ongoing culture of impunity in South Africa. And that unless VC, we take our institutions of democracy seriously and we implement their recommendations, we won't go where we need to go. So that's our two reflections: a risk of ongoing recurrence or ongoing causes of conflict, and a disappointment in the responses from our own state. We have released a public statement 2 weeks ago to say that we will escalate these issues to the Speaker of Parliament, because Parliament also has an oversight function over the state. But if we find no joy there, then we will litigate. We'll have to go to court and litigate for the implementation of those recommendations. Because it cannot be right that we spend so much money on hearings. People come and unburden themselves, trusting the Chapter 9 institutions, but then there's no follow-ups. That cannot happen. That has to stop, and we will litigate if we have no joy. Going forward, VC, there are 3 other initiatives that we are implementing. The first one is called the CAS project, C-A-S, CAS project. With this project, which sits in my office, we'll be following up with the KwaZulu-Natal Commissioner, Police Commissioner, for those cases of racist attacks. You'll remember that one of our findings, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, was that there were racist killings. People were killed based on racist stereotypes and things like that. We've had a hearing, we've had a report. We are asking for changes in policy, but secondly, we are also saying that there must be justice for people who were killed, people who were maimed and injured. There must be justice. So my office in August and September, will be following up, getting a list of the cases that the NPA has taken forward, the investigation that the police are doing, to hold them accountable for criminal prosecution where there's evidence. So we are not letting that go. So we have hearings which talks about social harmony, but alongside of that, there must be criminal justice. The third thing that we are doing is that we have implored the Department of Justice to urgently pass the Victim Support Services Act, the Victim Support Services Act. You will know, Ms. Zondo and colleagues, that in South Africa, when in a criminal case, the victim does not have much recourse. The victim comes as a witness. They come, they give evidence, there's either acquittal or a finding that the person is guilty. But normally the victim just sits there. There's no compensation for the victim, for example. So we are urgently asking the Department of Justice to pass that act, because that act, which was, by the way, the bill was from 2020, it's 4 years later. That bill makes it possible for victims of crime and so forth to have compensation. So the second thing that we are asking for is compensation for what happened in KwaZulu-Natal, but also what happened here in Gauteng. The third thing that we'll be implementing, VC, from our side is those ongoing social harmony dialogues. Last week, my team and I and the Shine team had our first one in the Western Cape, where we are setting up national dialogues. There was a TRC a while ago, but that project of nation building seems to have faltered. So what we have done in my office is to set up a committee that will advise me on what I call the national question. That committee of 11 people, civil society people, academics, members of the community and so forth, to advise us what is a social building agenda. So that committee was established in April this year. I'm pleased to see that the GNU statement of intent also talks about the need for social dialogue, but also the different foundations, the Mbeki Foundation, Kathara Foundation, the Bigo Foundation have also called for a national dialogue. That is very important. So what we are doing from our side is to continue those social dialogue initiatives. Lastly, VC, we are here today to listen to students, to listen to members of the community, to listen to civil society organizations to say, what are some of the main causes of social instability? And how can we prevent those causes? So the second reason why we are here, so the first reason is to give you a progress update to account to you, but secondly, to come and listen to, people who are embedded in communities to tell us what are some of the main issues and how we can work together. So we are here also in that listening capacity, and we look forward to hearing those recommendations. Thank you, VC.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Madlingozi. You've reflected on the Commission's position, and as Commissioner said, we look forward to also hearing from the student community and the affected communities as well on their reflections on the report, but also on what is currently going on in South Africa. One of the outputs of the report stated that the testimonies discussed various factors contributing to social unrest in South Africa. Testimony, including government agencies and organizations, highlighted the role of secondary actors and presented statistics on increased unemployment, poverty, and vulnerability, primarily affecting Black South Africans. It further said that testimony emphasized that much of the unrest, including theft, was carried out by poor members of the community as a way of expressing discontent and frustration with deteriorating living conditions. And that's very important for the second leg of our program, where we are reflecting and getting input from members of the community, but also on this question of social cohesion. And to give input, may I please ask panel members to come forward, please, to provide the summary of the Unrest report with emphasis on social cohesion, fault lines. Martina Hunter-Parsonage, please come forward. She's from the South African Human Rights Commission. To provide input on the role of student organizations in forging community cohesion, Tato Morema, the SRC representative, I think the General Secretary, please come forward. Conditioning of the poor to violence in South Africa. Please help me welcome Ms. Nomzamo Zondo from the Socioeconomic Rights Institute of South Africa. The practical implementation of social cohesion in the July unrest affecting communities in Phoenix, Nduzuma, KwaMashu, Inanda. Please help me welcome Ntombenhle Ngwane from the SAHRC's Social Harmony Through National Efforts program. And then finally, from the Community Advice Offices of South Africa, please help me welcome Tsepo Kutumela, who will be discussing the socio-economic needs of communities that make them vulnerable to social unrest. Please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, how the program is going to be run, you will be stuck with me for the rest of the program. That's part one. And then secondly, we will then start with Ms. Martina Hunter-Parsonage, who will provide the reflections. We will then move to Mr. Tato Morema, Ms. Nomzamo Zondo, Mr. Tsepo Kutumela, and then end with Ms. Ntombenhle Ngwane on the Shine project. In that order, unless people go out of hand, yes, I did. Unless people go out of hand in terms of time, but I think they are adequately briefed, they should be running in that order. After that, ladies and gentlemen, we will be open for questions and answers and reflections. That's the most important part, as Commissioner indicated, that we are looking for reflections and input from everybody who forms part and has taken the time out from their day to join us today. On that note, please help me welcome the panel.
Thank you. Good morning to the VC and the registrar and the community of TUT. Thank you very much for welcoming us to your very beautiful campus. morning to my co-panelists and Commissioner Madingozi and the PM and the rest of the student community. To give the summary of our findings and recommendations with a focus on the social cohesion fault lines, I want us to go back to what the VC and Commissioner Madlingozi said about the interregnum and the space of unfreedom, because this is based on the investigation where South Africa finds ourselves. We do find ourselves in the interregnum, in this unfreedom space, or in this middle in-between space to the before post-colonialism, or where the new are not being born. The Commission's investigation focused on 4 issues, looking at how socioeconomic conditions in South Africa affected the unrest. The second was the racist violence which was exclusively in KZN, and the third issue is the lack of security or the absence of policing during the unrest. So if we go to the first one, the issue of socioeconomic rights, which I'm sure Namzama will speak to in a more practical sense, but the Commission made the following findings: that the socioeconomic conditions were what Minister Ibrahim Patel, or former Minister Ibrahim Patel, described as the dry tinder. While there was organization to some level, the unrest was able to spread as far and as quickly as it did because of socioeconomic conditions in the country. And it's not just about poverty or access to food, water, sanitation, and housing, which is essential, but the things that the Commission looked at and focused on was, one, that given our levels of unemployment or access to education or something, we have young people in society who don't have an occupation or something to keep them stimulated or entertained, or jobs that offer a living wage. Together so the idea is that if you have something keeping you occupied or stimulated, you won't be motivated to carry on looting or to engage in acts of violence, but also that the socioeconomic conditions, together with having nothing to do, allows for what sociologists call anger displacement theory, which is when community members who don't have access to housing or jobs, or can't access university, when they can't access the municipality that's responsible for the housing, or they can't fix things themselves, they direct their anger at this thing elsewhere. For example, so you get caught up in the looting, you go along with the crowd mentality because it's a way to ventilate your anger or your disappointment at service delivery, your disappointment at your living conditions. But an important part of the socioeconomic factor is this idea that the VC spoke about, which is that the majority of people in our country do not feel a sense of ownership and do not feel a sense of community, because if you felt a sense of ownership and you felt a sense of belonging in the country, it's less likely that you would destroy infrastructure. It's less likely that you would loot. Shoshanguve is particularly because TUT has a campus there, it's a good example of where the community did take ownership. They did prevent looting. So it's important that when we think about socioeconomic rights, think about feeling like you're belonging and feeling like you can defend property, as opposed to it doesn't matter because you don't feel like it's yours or this country is yours. As Minister Lindiwe Zulu stated during the hearing, she said, at the end of the day, if you have people who are happy in the environment, people who feel they belong from an economic view, people who think they have the most basics, it's not very easy to mobilize those kind of people, but it's easier to mobilize when they feel like they have very little to lose. In terms of recommendations on socioeconomic rights, the Commission found that the government and private sector have an urgent responsibility to address the socioeconomic inequalities and increase access to economy, which continue to be differentiated along racial lines in patterns that are reflective of a racialized economy. And despite the progressive realization of socioeconomic rights being the responsibility of government, the Commission included the private sector in its recommendations, not only because of its historical and current importance in nation building project, but that the sector remains central to the National Economic Recovery Plan. The Commission recommended and found that there's a need for all South Africans to have a share in the economy and for common ownership of the country's vast natural and other resources to be shared amongst people of South Africa. And the Unrest has demonstrated the need to create a legitimate, inclusive economy. The second issue was the racially motivated attacks and killings in the country. This again comes to this idea of the 1949, the cycle of violence, 1949 Cato Manor, 1985 Inanda riots, and the 2021 Phoenix killings. I'm glad that Commissioner Madlingozi spoke about Solplaatjies, that the native is a pariah in his own land, because that is at the source of all of those. The 1949 Cato Manor riots, the 1985, is that Black people in all of those situations had less rights in the land of their birth. And it makes you angry that you don't feel at home, or that you have a place, that you have less rights in your country of birth. But also the killings in KZN really brought to fore the continued ideas that people hold of Black people, and particularly Black men, that Black men are viewed as violent and somehow end up being the victims of racial violence, that you have to attack Black people and you have to attack Black men because they are violent, but they end up being, in this country, the biggest victims of violence. In South Africa, we continue to experience racism on a daily basis. Black people make up 80% of the population, and yet we still go outside of the state and NGOs. We still go into private spaces every day where this majority is not reflected, and also the cultures and identities and ways of being are not reflected, even where there are representation, even where there is representation. We've moved into spaces, we haven't decolonized the spaces or made those spaces ours. We've moved into the same parliament, we've moved into the same buildings and the same, in other sectors, universities. We haven't reconstructed our ways of being. And so, while the Commission made recommendations to the Department of Justice, it is up to us in society to think of different ways, not only by using law, that we can come up with to deal with systemic racism and the everyday racism that we experience in South Africa. We need to try new ways to deal with this, even if we try and fail, but we cannot keep the status quo, otherwise we risk having further racial violence. Then the third issue was the lack of security and the lack of policing. The Commission made extensive findings on the lack of policing, but just to focus on the fault lines and so issues of socioeconomic rights, racism, and the intersection of policing and us being in this interregnum or in this space of unfreedom, it becomes clear that we've still inherited we're struggling to undo the apartheid policing style. While we have Black policemen, our policing system is still focused on state security and not human security. It's on protection of the state and not on protection of human beings. And so the police are, as you know, our biggest example, Marikana, are still, instead of protecting community members, are committing violence against community members. And so policing itself needs to be really, the structure of policing in South Africa itself also needs to be decolonized, and extensive policy changes made. Thank you.
All right. Good morning to the VC, the National Commissioner, and the students of TUT, and together with the rest of the audience. My name is Tato Morema, the SAHRC General, ISRC. To start off, I'll be speaking on the role of student organizations in forging community cohesion. So I've been listening to all the other speakers, and I was just appalled and rather triggered to start the speech in this way, to say that it's notable that we produce many graduates, yet the unemployment rate remains high. What is it that we are teaching students that is failing to challenge this echoing disease of unemployment and inequality? Advocate Leslie Sidiwe once said in a Mutlabane seminar that there is no prosthetic to an amputated spirit. So we are dealing with many racial segregations, discriminations, inequalities, gender-based violence that have come as a descendant from those who lived before us. And yet we have inherited batons of leaders who led before us, who were able to challenge the status quo and not just live it as it is. So the main idea of student organizations is to really put it out there that we are here to serve the nation so that it does not starve of its youth. I'll repeat that again. We are here to serve so that the nation does not starve of its youth, because majority of our youth are being lost in the systems of education. That is where many of them are lost to drugs, end up being very bad human beings in society, GPV, and then now inequality and unemployment ends up just cementing them to the graves. So student organizations exist to ensure the non-negotiable access to free, decolonized, and well-resourced education. It is not a colonial society, I agree, National Commissioner. Yet systems of colonial architecture continue to exist even post-colonial life, to deprive education avenues the freedom of total expansion and inclusion. So inclusivity is on the downpour. The reality is that we are somewhere as students, as society, as communities, as a country, but we are not where we should be. Student organizations have played a critical role in South Africa, and this remains historical. We can date it back to 1976. We can date it back to the Fees Must Fall. We can date it back to the recent unrest last year due to the implemented NSFAS systems of ISAGA and all these other service providers who were now frustrating students due to delayed payments and some of the defunding of our students. The fundamental lingual characteristic core among community of scholars is education. That is what really brings us together. If we are to speak of cohesion between the students and the larger community, we then must set forth education as the point of departure. We can bicker back and forth about the complexities to which our agonies lie. Yet one thing remains: what brings us together as students, student organizations, and the community at large is not what should keep us together. We are distorted by the many strikes that happen. Each year, we are having problems where students are denied access to education. They are delayed in registration. Some applications are not processed. There is conundrums and problems and challenges in terms of residences. I so happen to be in a portfolio which oversees oversight responsibility on residence issues in the whole institution of TUT. And I have seen the atrocities that students have to deal with on a yearly basis, where they are left without residences, where they are forced into residences which are of inhuman conditions. And we exist as student organizations to fight that, because the university, the residence which the student stays, is their second home to the home which they have left at home. And now if we fail to foster care, unity, empowerment and development in these spaces, then we have failed as a role of forging community cohesion between the students and the community. Now, the hammer to nail phenomenon in this regard is our unified mission to challenge the status quo and curb the high youth unemployment rate. Student organizations exist to protect and ensure absolute respect to one of the human rights clearly written in Chapter 2, Section 7 to 39 of the Bill of Rights, which establishes that everyone has the right to education. This is just a summarized version. Student organizations now exist, and these are the main points that I'm going to base this rather discussion. I'm trying to make it less of a speech as much as possible. They exist to protect. That's one. So if you are existing in a student organization space, then your primary role is to protect your fellow students by all means necessary. We experience every year police brutalities, and I'm happy that the fellow panelists mentioned it, that we experience police brutality on an annual basis in these universities. The same police officers that are meant to protect us are brutalizing us. And yet now we are brought to the complete realization that we have not really moved out of that colonial system. There are certain systems which are still in place, which continue to really cause damage into the empowerment and development of a black child. They exist to serve. It's about service. If you protect someone, you are going to have to serve them, and you serve them by ensuring that all rights that are enthroned to them are protected, and rather empower them in becoming better versions of themselves academically. They exist to advocate, to teach, and to educate our students, to encourage and instill political, social, and economic consciousness. I feel like that one is the most important, because you can just see with the trend that goes on now in our parliaments and rather many of societies, government structures, your municipalities, your provincial legislatures and all these other portfolios. There's a lack of leadership. And really leadership is something you can possess, but it's something which must be sharpened. You cannot just wake up and say you are a leader, and yet education-wise you're suppressed, skills-wise you're suppressed. And all the systems are from where it all started in the university setting. Redress and practically correct unfair discriminatory practices, underdeveloped and under-resourced course programs in the academic space. Now, they exist to promote constructive dialogues on the state of affairs of the country. And this is what forges community cohesion. They undertook responsibility of ensuring that communities positively benefit from the emergence of an educated, politically and economically acclimatized young people who shall exist to further develop our country and society. Now, I mentioned that if it was not for the youth of June 16, 1976, the quality and equality of education which we, you and I, are receiving today would be null and void. Someone had to stand up. So I'm just trying to really emphasize on the point of saying that the point of departure on the redress and rather turnaround point of this country was around the youth, particularly students. So if we fail at our responsibility to protect and really own that space, then we are going to fail to really take ourselves from where we are to where we should actually be as a country, considering the high unemployment rate and all these other unexplored avenues. October 2015, the University of Witwatersrand began a protest against the 10.5 fees increase that was announced just before their exams began. This was the birth of the fees must fall. Now, this just echoed and really expanded throughout the nation. It also emanated from a student movement. Now, August 2023, student organizations and student communities took to the street across the country, including right here in TUT, over NSFAS allowances, the payment system of Izaga. This is of recent. And really we can see a trend. You say that the moment you suppress a student, there's a student organization that exists to really respond back. And it's really devastating and rather disappointing, because some of these things could have been solved ages back. But then now we question the leadership that is in these spaces that must protect our students together with us, if what they are doing is really what should be solving our problems today. Thirdly, I'll go on to say, what type of leaders are we grooming? As student organizations, our responsibility also lies at ensuring that those who are entrusted with the responsibility to equip our students with the necessary skills are doing it to the utmost best and adhering to the standards and norms that have been set upon them. Now, we are witnessing a transition, slow yet evident, of our world as we know it, from a human-based labor into robotics-accelerated industries and tech-driven firms. Now, for a simpler terminology, I'm basically talking about the fourth industrial revolution and onwards. It is the responsibility of student organizations to confront and solve the ever-emerging challenges that constrain the development and improvement of our students' enrichment and their academic excellence. Now, it is not a secret that in our universities there are certain programs that still exist that really do not cater for the real world out there. We should be focusing more on IT-driven programs, creating robotics and really existing in the tech space, because we are slowly moving away from your mass human-based labor into a robotics-driven tech industries. So that's where we must now see the transition change. That's where student organizations also play a role to ensure that the university, together with stakeholders, foster in this change that is much necessary. Can today's graduates and youth students relevantly exist and partake in the economic transformation acceleration? I think I've already answered much of this question as I try to unpack the relevancy of graduates that we are producing as a universities. I'm not being very specific. I'm trying to speak on a much broader sense. All universities across South Africa, there's the same problem. So we are here to serve. I'm going to quote this in conclusion. Utata and Nelson Mandela, the late. It's a famous quote that most people are familiar with. He says that education is the great engine of personal development. It is through education that the daughter of a peasant can become a doctor. The son of a mine worker can become the head of a mine. That child of a farm worker can become the president of a great nation. It is what we make out of what we have, not what we are given, that separates one person from the other. So I'm not going to shy away from the fact that we are far from where we should be, but we are somewhere. So as student organizations, we must actively work with what we have to ensure that we drive this economy together with everyone else to where we should be, because part and parcel of being a young black activist has taught me what Mama Winnie Madikizela once said, to say that you must ensure that even in a neighborhood, in a summarized version, you not only look at what is happening in your house, but what is also transpiring in your neighbors, for you all coexist within one environment. So student organizations coexist with the universities, coexist with students, but the community at large. So what we do must not only impact the present, but must also advocate for the future, because we are not here to stay, we are here to move into an ever-emerging tomorrow. I thank you.
So I've been given 5 minutes, Tato, but I wanted to open with, I studied at Vets. So one of the things that I credit the Fees Must Fall generation with doing was ending outsourcing at Vets. And I came from a generation that was in the middle. I was at Vets between 2002 and 2005. And the battles around outsourcing had happened 99, 2001. So when I arrived, it had already been lost. And we were involved in trying to arrange and support workers who had just stepped into outsourced labor. And the fact that now we can stand and look at those workers having their full rights, having their children be able to come into the university space, is the work of youth. So that's just my way of saying we respect you and we honor all the young people that are in the room. And I was given a very difficult job. I'm gonna speak about the centering of violence in communities. One, both as a way of governing, firstly, but two, as a means of communication. And then lastly, I'm gonna try and speak in the little time that I've been given on the merging of public and private violence and what that does. So, because I'm only a lawyer, I'm a person who doesn't experience this thing on a daily basis. It's my practice to at least give you a perspective of who that I work with. I'm sorry for that. I don't know what I'm doing. That's because the doof, doof, doof. But Wiseman Buthelezi, who's an Abahlali Basamjolola member in Cato Crest, spoke a few years ago about their experiences of housing governance, right? I'm not talking about protest governance, I'm talking about housing governance. And he said, they kick us out like dogs. They won't even recognize us as humans. They even destroy the food we cook and throw sand everywhere. Without even engaging us, they demolish and burn our homes and leave. We are only good for votes, nothing more. We have no jobs and no land. And I imagine that the community that we're representing in court yesterday, Ms. Mbeki, would have agreed with this, because they had the very same experience on Thursday. Not 3 years ago, as Mr. Buthelezi spoke, last week, Thursday, that was their experience. The municipality came into their community, demolished their homes, burnt whatever building material was left, threw away their food. And this has been the experience of communities who are known colloquially as land invaders, who I would say are unlawful occupiers. So when you see new informal settlements that are coming up, most of those informal settlements are only being managed through violence. I know that many of you remember what happened with Mr. Bolani Kolani as we saw him being pulled out of his home naked in August 2020. That experience of Mr. Kolani is an everyday experience for Abahlali in Johannesburg, in Ekurhuleni, in Durban. So it's not an issue of a racist municipality in the Western Cape. It's an issue of this government that governs through violence. And in a space where, again, they're able to use the courts at times, they're able to approach organizations like SAHRC, they're able to report to the Human Rights Commission about these challenges. But the state's main tool of engaging with them around land occupations is violence. What does that say? What does that mean for when we are angry? if the people who are governing us have as their own tool violence, what are we going to do? But maybe we could say, as Ukwanta was trying to say, they could say, look, our children go to that school. My son is employed building that road. And maybe they would say, I won't do anything. But unfortunately, again, when they engage with the government, they are taught and told and shown that it's actually violence that gets responses. If you went back 10 years ago, actually 15 years ago, Prof. Madlingozi, Commissioner Madlingozi, I should say, you would have seen that we used to say there's a smoke that calls, right? And we were saying burning tires, closing the road, blockading the road would bring your mayor, would bring the premier, would bring the ward councillor. But as we sit today, the smoke does not call. Even if you close the N12 blocking trucks, the smoke won't call until someone dies. So we've moved from 15 years ago where, as a community, you could say, if we close off the N12, if we cut off the economic system, they'll respond to us. They won't come. In Slovo Park community that we represent, the only way they got the premier to come and listen to them after they didn't just protest, send petitions, they engaged through Chapter 9 institutions, they litigated, have a reported judgment in court, they blockaded the N12, still no one came. But when a 16-year-old was killed, 2 weeks later too, not even on the day that the 16-year-old was killed, then the premier came to the community. And when he came, he could put up a marquee to sit 1,000 people. He could have the mayor of the city of Johannesburg in the room. He could have the ward councillor, so that the community leader, when he opened, he said, I greet you, premier, I greet you, mayor, but I won't greet these ward councillors because these ward councillors were the reasons why we're being shot. So we're in a situation, in a state, where violence is actually the means of communication. So how do we then solve? How do we then not expect that another 2021 is going to happen in that kind of environment? But I'm going to make the last point, and then I'll try and come to the recommendations of Prof. Madlingozi. Is then there's an issue about the merging of public and private violence. And again, Abahlali's own experience is so clear on this, that the state can say, we have a problem with you, and then they're not going to come as the state. In fact, for Abahlali, they came a few times in different ways. But then they have private players. They have Inkabi. Or in the case of migrant communities in Gauteng, in Mpumalanga, they have Operation Tutulas, who are using private violence to take away people's socioeconomic rights, take away people's political rights. And then what the state does, as we saw in Alex in 2021, the state marches behind them. Tutula leads, SAPS follows. Here in Pretoria, Tutula leads, Home Affairs follows. In Dupslot, when they killed Elvis Nyati, Tutula led and killed Elvis Nyati. The next day, the Department of Home Affairs was there, checking people's passports. Not that the police were there trying to find Elvis's killers. No, Home Affairs was there checking people's passports. So we're in a situation in this continuum where violence is almost the one message that is being heard and understood. And even to the extent that when people speak about protest, they say it's violent protest. And then you ask, so what was violent in the Slovo Park protest? Is it because the police killed Karokbo Chaka, or is it because the community closed the road? But almost now everything, in order for there to be accountability or an attempt to silence communities, anything that you do that is not sanctioned by the state is branded as violent. And then everything that they do that is violent is sort of either ignored or branded as justified. And I want to give you why this is, how this happens. Every time a policeman kills someone, do you know that IPID has to get permission from SAPS to charge them? IPID must get permission from SAPS to charge the person, the policeman who has killed someone. So for Abahlali in March, Mr. Manqele was killed in March. By September, there was no one, in fact, even now, 2 years later, 2024 now, no one has been charged because there hasn't been permission from SAPS to say, charge the police officers who were there on the ground on the day that this guy got killed. And so it's not only simply matters of because you are poor, you don't have a voice. When there's clear violations of rights, there's actually a means where state violence is protected and is almost already, there's institutionalized impunity. On the management of police impunity, only 3% of cases reported against the police end up in a conviction. 3%. 3 in every 100 end up with a conviction. And I don't mean a conviction of in a criminal court. I'm talking about a conviction within the disciplinary processes of SAPS. So someone has been disciplined, but only 3% of those people end up being disciplined. The students in the room will know that the most recent death that we saw in student protests happened in Braamfontein and Ntokozi Mtumba. All of us saw the videos. What happened to Ntokozi and Mtumba's killers? They were acquitted in front of all of South Africa to see, because the systems in the criminal justice system are designed to make state violence unaccountable. But on the flip side of that coin, when you then go and look at what happens to communities, what happened in the Unrest, Seri, Carl's, Prof. Madlingozi was still there, and the lawyers for human rights went to the courts and checked what had happened to people who had been arrested from the Unrest for looting. Not only do you find people who were arrested for looting, but we found people who were not involved in looting. We found a woman who had left a 5-month-old baby at home because the police had come into her home, had found looted goods in the house next door, had gone into her house, and because there were goods in her house, those goods were declared as looted. She then brought a receipt from Clicks, and they didn't even have the receipt. They went to trace it and find it. They brought the receipt, and she was kept in detention for at least 6 weeks before we saw her and were able to arrange for her release. So even for every action of violence by poor people, the system makes sure that not only that person accounts, but people around them account, right? Whereas for the state, every time, and I'm going to close here, Provincial Manager of the Human Rights Commission, you worked on the Marikana case. If you're able to tell anyone in this room, even a single police officer who has been convicted on a disciplinary offense, on a criminal offense for the deaths in Marikana, I would be amazed. Thank you.
Oh, you swapped. Oh, okay. I think I didn't catch that. I was organizing a chair. Esteemed guests, particularly the students, these are truly indeed our esteemed guests because they are the ones on whom the future of the country rests and the direction that the country will take rests. I remember someone saying that the old ones have messed up the country. It's time that the younger ones now take over and lead the country forward. Mine, as indicated in the program, I don't have a copy of the program here, but it's fine, is to speak on socio-economic conditions that make communities vulnerable to social unrest. But before I can get into that, I'd like to start a bit on this note, particularly making reference to the report by the Commission. That I'll first begin by saying that the preamble of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa mentions that one of the undertakings that South Africans have taken upon themselves, because when you read the preamble, it says, we the people. So in other words, it says all of us as a collective. One of the undertakings that has been taken up is to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society that is based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. And this has been the bedrock upon which the transition from a segregated and racist apartheid state, where the move from that state to one that recognizes and protects and acknowledges and promotes the inherent human dignity in each person who resides within the Republic, whether documented or undocumented. And among the pathways of recognizing this inherent human dignity, one of the ways that it finds expression in is how justice is administered, and how it was remodeled. Yes, there is the punitive criminal justice system, but also one that is I think in a way it's a stepchild of the justice system, the Transitional Justice Project. The program director made mention, I think it's the program director, made mention of that, or is it Professor Madlingozi? I can't quite recall, but made mention that, yes, I think it was Professor Madlingozi, that the victim, there needs to be reparation to the victim, more than just the punishment that will be handed over to the perpetrator. And when reading an International Center for Transitional Justice report that was authored by Roger Jutis in June of 2021, that report makes mention that transitional justice seeks to address the exclusion and the related grievances that a victim can feel as a result of the harm he or she suffered after experiencing an abuse of their human rights. Now, coming to the July 21 unrest, we've had many and varied responses. We've had many and varied reflections and opinions on what happened, what possibly happened, what the cause was. CAOSA, from our side, made a submission to the report. And among the items or the submissions that was made is that in the areas of Inanda, Amaoti, Bambai, Zwelicha, as well as Kwamashu, all of which are located within the province of KwaZulu-Natal, the long-standing racial tensions that had been simmering, because at times some things simmer and do not they are not combustible. They just simmer and sometimes go on to die a natural death. But these simmering tensions between the Indian and African people then went into spontaneous combustion, and there was direct conflict and between these two groupings, which resulted in deaths occurring. And the second one was that there was also a damage to the shopping malls and in other places of businesses, particularly in the provinces of Gauteng as well as the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal. And it was, in a way, it was to some degree humorous, but also at the same time concerning to observe social media during the time around the elections, and more especially around the time when the results were disputed and there were public outbursts and pronouncements. And there is a particular group I am in, just for interest's sake, I won't mention the name of the group, in one of the social media platforms. And one of the things that was constantly said as a refrain was, if MK Party does not get its votes that they were robbed of, we are going to loot. It was I'm saying it's a humorous one because it just makes you question the logic around such a conclusion. But also it is very concerning because it communicates that the spark can be set off at any moment of social unrest, and it doesn't need to be something as big as of a national, something that is big or happening on a national reach or at a national level. Now, I'd like to now come back to the topic that we were given, the socio-economic conditions that make communities vulnerable. As community advice officers, we, I would say, are at the cold face of where everything is happening. We are walking among those very communities, those dusty streets, those communities where sometimes you ask yourself that I left home having had a bowl, something to eat or breakfast, and I'm going to go back home to a plate of food to eat. But I am attending to people who do not know where their next meal will come from. And that program director, you touched on that, a sense of belonging. When people feel that they do not belong within an institution, they will disrupt. When people feel that they are not being heard, whatever cries, which is the first point that I'd like to speak around, the sense of belonging is what contributes to the conditions that make people, communities vulnerable to social unrest. That sense of belonging, of togetherness. Quite often when we have community engagements and community imbizos, and we make reference to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1, 2, or 5 would say, that is your constitution, it is not my constitution. I do not take ownership, I do not feel represented within that document, and therefore I'm rejecting that constitution. And they then move to disrupt those who are secure in their comfort, to borrow from Prof. Madonsela, Julie Madonsela. The second one, second point that contributes and makes communities vulnerable to social unrest is youth unemployment. Each year when matric results, and I'd like to applaud you for being at university and taking up the opportunity to study further and actually studying further. Because sometimes I remember back when I was in university, some came there just to chill. They came there it was a social club for them. There is a staggering number of unemployed young people in South Africa. And each year when the matric results are published, whether cooked or not, depending on who you listen to, there is also an afterthought that comes that a number of those will find themselves not in employment, not in any places of further education and training, and will find themselves languishing among the streets in the townships, because it's mostly in the townships where we operate. They will find themselves being attracted and gravitating toward unwholesome activities. They will be attracted, and I come from Davidton, by the way, and I remember, I think it was former Minister Begicele. I almost referred to him by a street name, a colloquial name we've given him in the street, Chuck Norris. I remember he once made a comment that people from Davidton, that's where IT resides. And not IT in the sense of the skills of information technology, but rather where people who operate within this industry, I will call it an industry, of, I don't know the English word for it, a card. Those who would come and swindle people of their funds by swapping your either your credit card or your ATM card, and then gain access to your money, to the money that is in your bank account. So a lot of the young people within the township, and when those people have gone, benze isko, I'll mention it, I'll make mention of it in isiZulu, in a language that is often spoken in the townships. Uma benze isko, they come back and it's a party. They buy expensive drinks and they prime it. And those young people who now have nothing else to do, look at those and salivate and come and join them. And they get enrolled into this cycle of engaging in these criminal activities. And a third one that I'd like to make mention of as being a contributor and a condition that makes communities vulnerable is corruption. Corruption is, we've described it using many names. However, what is of concern is how vulnerable people are exploited by sometimes government officials, whether at local government level or at provincial government level or at national government level even. But mostly it's at local government level because that's where they get to interact with officials from the government. But also not just government officials, people from political parties who are connected or have access to the levers of power. Now recently in the Benoni area, for those who do not know the geography of Gauteng, that's in the East Rand, the city of Ekurhuleni. There is a plot of land that belongs to the Modabi prison. back in the day, the inmates would plant and work the land to harvest green vegetables for their consumption in the prison. But now it's laid, it's now overgrown, it's not utilized anymore. So someone from a particular political party started selling plots of land or parcels of land to community members, saying that no, they take advantage of the gap that is in the law, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act, that when people have been residing in a particular parcel of land, after an X amount of time, you cannot evict them without going via the courts. So that is one of the things that communities within the townships, one of the means through which they have made vulnerable. I'm glad that that has stopped and the municipality responded, because when people come and pop out their money to buy a plot of land, a parcel of land on which to reside, it is sometimes out of desperation. It is sometimes out of one of the spaces we work within as community advice offices, and I'll just, on a tangent, just go off and make a connection to it, is the family homes. When the parents pass on, the siblings, we don't agree with one another, the grandchildren of the house, we don't agree with one another on about who should reside there. And as a result of a desire to have peace of mind, people then find themselves spilling out onto the streets and being exploited by these corrupt officials. And the fourth point that I'd like to speak to as being a contributor to what makes people and communities vulnerable to social unrest is a restricted access to the socio-economic rights. There is now it's in the media within the city of Joburg, the 200 rand surcharge for prepaid electricity. And I'm following with keen interest the discussions around that and how the state is defending the decision and how people out in the streets are saying, no, we can't afford this. Already as things stand, electricity, the prepaid electricity is expensive. So an additional 200 rand is really going to make life impossible and difficult for us. And finally, as a contributor to what makes communities vulnerable is the education system. My panelist earlier spoke to the fourth industrial revolution. I think it was her. No, it was my panelist to the right, sorry. He spoke of the fourth industrial revolution. And the education system as it stands is inadequately equipping learners at schools. It is, I remember I went to school once upon a time when we would be forced to learn and memorize a sketch of a locust. And one of the exam questions would be label all the parts of the locust. And now when we look back on it and we think, how was this of relevance to our education? And someone jokingly said, no, some of you come from Limpopo and you eat locusts there, so you need to know what you are eating. But it is, the education system is as it is structured currently, is inadequately equipping learners. I know, and I won't spend a lot of time in this, and because we've heard from even among others, Section 27 criticizing the education system and how it is structured and how young learners from as young or a lower grade as grade 4 are unable to read. And it is ill-equipping them for the world that we live in. I remember having a conversation as I conclude with some community members and saying, and this was before the elections, and saying that, you know, our parliamentarians, our lawmakers, like arguing over frivolous stuff, just useless stuff, when they should be discussing around laws that will govern the implementation of artificial intelligence. You read and hear of reports in European countries as well as in the Americas, the United States of America, about how the lawmakers there are discussing around laws that will govern the implementation and the distribution and the infusion of artificial intelligence in everyday life. I'd like to make reference to one particular example. I think it was in one country in Europe, I think it was Germany, the self-driving buses. It was involved in a car accident, and subsequently the person that was run over by the bus died. So now it was a discussion and an argument on who should bear liability for the death of this person. The bus company said, no. The bus was not driven it was not driven by anyone. So therefore we cannot take liability. We cannot accept liability for the death of this person. Go to the manufacturers of the sellers of the artificial intelligence software. The sellers of the artificial intelligence software said, no. This bus did not be, we're only selling a product. And the thing that killed the person is a bus under a brand X, motor brand X, if I may make an example, VW. So go and sue VW. They should bear liability. So it was that finger pointing, and our lawmakers are not even looking at such things in the sense of them bringing about laws that will ensure that the implementation of artificial intelligence in our country is governed within the law. And also our education system is not equipping young people to be adequately equipped and fully equipped and fit for purpose for the world we live in. So that young people will know that beyond matric or beyond schooling, you don't necessarily have to be an influencer. You don't necessarily have to be a doctor. Not that there's anything wrong with those career paths. You don't necessarily have to be a lawyer, but you can be someone that participates meaningfully in the world that we live in, and be a meaningful participant in that world in the sense of being properly and adequately equipped via how you are educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to the Vice Chancellor and to our Commissioner, Professor Madlingozi. Good morning to my fellow panelists and to the student community. Mine is an easy task of just giving an indication or an account of what the Commission has done post the July unrest, which affected especially Gauteng and KZN. So Commissioner Madlingozi has already alluded to the fact that soon after the unrest, the Commission convened an imbizo where we were given a mandate. And one of the mandate was to carry out the investigative hearing, and that is what we did. And the second issue that was quite palpable in the discussions that we had on that day was that of the state of our social relations as people living in South Africa. So we were also mandated to go back and try to come up with an initiative that would assist the Commission or assist the country in terms of trying to mend the social relations, because it was quite clear that we are going on a very wrong trajectory when it comes to how we relate to each other as South Africans or as people living in South Africa. Also, we looked into our trends analysis as the Commission. The complaints that we received the most is still, around the issues of racism and the racial tensions. And we felt that there's a lot that is happening in our country, and the fact that we transitioned from apartheid and colonialism as we are from that kind of era to a democracy, it never really meant that we move also in terms of how we relate to one another. We never really got a chance to learn about each other and to regard each other as human beings before anything else. So after after we're given that mandate, the Commission tried to consult with a lot of people from all sectors of society. And in that, we came up with this initiative that we call the Social Harmony Through National Effort. So the initiative is as a result of the viewpoints that were shared by a lot of people in South Africa, and also the deep reflection that we conducted as South Africans. So the first thing that we realized, or that we were informed from by the people that we were consulting with, is that as a nation, we have worked very hard in creating a country with a constitution and the laws that govern the people and the institutions. We have, however, neglected to create a nation. Commissioner has already alluded to that fact. We never intentionally tried to create this unity in diversity that the Constitution is speaking about. So we have failed necessarily to update our software, if you put it in a computer analogy. We focused on building our hardware to be into the democratic state, but the software, the internal, the interpersonal relations, the understanding what equality means for all of us, we never really attended to that. So we have avoided also to decidedly address the fractured interpersonal relations as we transitioned to the democracy. So there are many things that we see in our society today that are a reflection or an indication that we need to attend to these things if we want to move as one society, if we want to be united in our diversity. So there's the xenophobic attacks that we see, the racist slurs, the domestic violence, especially gender-based violence, the homophobia, the tribalism that we see are all an indication that we are internally still stuck in the era that we are coming from. So then we, as I've already indicated, came up with this social harmony through national effort. And the emphasis on this SHINE initiative is the understanding that, firstly, each and every one of us have a role to play in order to create harmony. Even if it's just harmony where you reside in your surroundings, we have a role to play. So the I that you see on that logo is indicative of that every individual has a role to play. And also the N and the E, which is the national effort, also indicates that it's not gonna take magic to achieve social harmony. It's gonna take us coming together as a nation in effort, and it's gonna take also the efforts, the doing of something for us to be able to achieve social harmony. So the SHINE initiative encourages three things. So basically the SHINE is like a top-down, a bottom-up kind of approach. So it focuses on the individual, and with the understanding or the hope that if we all transform as individuals, that will also have an effect in the state of our society as a whole. So the SHINE is pillared in three spheres. The first thing that we encourage through the initiative is for all of us to reflect on our individual contributions to social disharmony. Sometimes we carry, or we are taught as people, but to be, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. Sometimes we are taught as human beings, or we observe our surroundings, and then we carry ourselves in how we have been taught. Like I'm remembering the issue of the student, I think it was in Stellenbosch, who is a young person, probably born after 2000 and certainly after 1994, but still being able to show racism in the manner that he did in that university with that black student. So you ask yourself that for a person who has not been here during that time, how is it that they are still able to carry that level of racism. So we're saying through the Russian initiative that we need to, we need to start reflecting. Sometimes we also create disharmony in our homes. We create disharmony in our working environments, in our places of residence as students. You create disharmony, but you don't really sometimes take accountability from an individual perspective to say, you know, I may have done this today. So I may have done this today, and I shouldn't have, and maybe I should also go back and apologize. So taking time to reflect on your own contribution, we think that's one of the ways that we can start as a nation to move forward. The second thing that we encourage through the Shine Initiative is the issue of positive dialogue, and that is why we are having this dialogue today. We want to encourage people to go back to dialoguing with an intention in mind to come up with positive solutions. So we are, as a result, trying to open spaces of dialogue, even in institutions of higher learning, so that, you know, we always have that avenue where people are able to ventilate their issues. The third one is the issue of intentionally learning about our diversity. Sometimes we carry out, as I've already mentioned, misconceptions about each other, and that's because we were spatially separated and we never really got a chance to learn about each other. So through the Shine Initiative, we are encouraging that we open spaces of learning about our diversities, and that we say we can do through just a simple act of sharing our stories, opening spaces where we're able to talk about who we are as individuals, because the end goal is for us to understand each other from a human level, instead of the other things that we carry as society. So in terms of the strides that have been taken by the Commission post the July unrest, the first thing, as it already been said, the KZN was mostly affected, and the racial issues that were happening there, it made the Commission to want to start the focus in that area. So we went into KZN early last year, I think around April, and we gathered together community leaders from the mostly affected communities of Phoenix, Bambai, Kwamashu, and Northdale and Khan Road corner. And we gathered the community leaders, and we gave them training in terms of giving them communication skills. And this was in an effort to ensure that they are able to transcend those skills into the communities that they lead. So we did I think it was a 3-week training where we were training them on communication, on conflict management, and also on victim empowerment, and also giving them victim empowerment tools. So the community leaders are working with the communities also in trying to give them those skills that they learned. We are also hoping or planning this year, before the year ends, to go back into that community and also continue the training efforts for the community leaders in terms of now teaching them about diversity, or giving them diversity education and sensitivity training, because we think that would be important for that community especially, so that they are able to relate with each other, not just on the basis of this one is an African and the other one is an Indian. So, okay, and that's the first thing that we did in that community post the July unrest. The second thing that we are doing as the Commission is we are developing our own diversity training and sensitivity program. So in the years, in the prior years, as the Commission, whenever we had to give a diversity education training, we would usually outsource it. So we decided through this initiative, and also as the commission, we decided that we are going to develop our own training program as the commission, and this is something that's going to allow us to be able to monitor if the training is helping, and also if there are areas of improvement that we must focus on. So this initiative is headed by the Shine Initiative, as well as the Equality Focal Area, as headed by Commissioner Mahlingozi. So this training program, once we have completed it, we will proactively give it out to organizations that require it, and also if there are organizations that come to us, requesting diversity education, then we will be able to offer it. The third thing that we are doing also in this financial year is the issue of opening spaces of dialogue in institutions of higher learning. But this year we have decided to focus on TVET colleges, and this is because we felt that TVET colleges are not usually engaged in matters of national interest. So we thought that it would be a good starting point to have what we call shine clubs in these institutions, whereby the students will be able to dialogue with the various issues that they may be facing in that institution. The commission will also be holding their hand throughout the process and ensuring that they become a structure in an institution that can assist also in terms of diversity education. We also thought that it would be very important to utilize the space of tertiary institutions. One, because it is a space where young people that we really, that we all know are the leaders of tomorrow. We thought it would be important to start from that level. And also this year, we are starting, so we are going to appoint or to engage one TVET education institution in every province. And at the end of the financial year, I think in March next year, we will have a session which will be a national dialogue, whereby young people will be dialoguing on the national question, as Commissioner Mahlingozi has alluded, to say, what is the national question for young people? What is the struggle of the young people today? So we want to hear from you so that we are able to devise strategies on how we can move society forward. So, so we are hoping that as time goes, we will be able to open these shine clubs in each and every institution, including TUT, whereby it will be a space where young people will be able to share opinions and views, and the commission will get those views and also assist it in trying to create this culture of human rights in South Africa as the mandate of the commission requires us. So those are the three areas that we are focusing on currently, but we are hoping, the project it was launched in 2022, so it's a year or 2 years in. We are hoping that as time goes, we will also create more initiatives that will be driven towards creating social harmony in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much for imparting and for providing these insights. Some were difficult, some were challenging, and I think most importantly, they were thought-provoking. We are now heading to the final leg of our program, the Q&A session. There is a rotating microphone, I think. Yes, the Bongyo Komete, and there is another one that side as well. If there is anyone who has got questions, who has got thoughts, but most importantly, we encourage reflections. And then you can address them to, not me, I'm joking. You can address them to the panelists, but you could also address them to Commissioner and, dare I say, the VC as well. I see a number of hands, so we'll go through. Okay, no, I'll create a system. We'll have 4 at a time, and we'll try to get in different areas. We will start number 1, number 2, number 3 in the black and white, and the number 4 at the back. So number 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the back. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. I wish to greet the VC, Professor Maluleke, as well as Professor Madlingozi. Well, indeed, it was a mouthful of what has been submitted today. My name is, I'm Professor Mufokeng from the Department of Law, Safety and Security at Tshwane University of Technology. I realize that the concept of cohesion is something that is quite elusive, and considering the mandate of the Human Rights Commission, one wonders if indeed there will be a capacity, to be able to address, the internal issues. One speaker talked about the software. There is a saying that says a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And one speaker highlighted that, the focus now is on young people. And, before I joined TUT, I was in the law enforcement agency within South African Police Service. But these 2 working environments, they introduced me to a grown-up children that are hating and that are also hating each other and that are also imparting this hatred of tribalism, of racism, of witch hunting, to the younger generations. So my question is, there has been so many attempts within organizations of the so-called team building, so that we can build cohesion. We find that in South Africa, any person who tries to, rightly so, empowering those that are around them, we learn from others and kill them in the process. That is what is happening in South Africa. You find that in institutions of learning, if someone becomes, an expert and excel, there will be a witch hunting. It just shows how deeply, angry we are as a nation. So why, my question, apart from, because I really don't want to take more time, is that space of grown-up children in the places of working. Why do you neglect them? Why are you addressing to a younger generation when actually we are killing each other in spaces of learning, looking, for witch hunting, things like that. Thank you.
Sorry, before you go, should that be for, or who should answer that question? Perhaps?
Any person who can answer the question.
I'll hand it to Commissioner Madlingozi.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Ndomiso, TUT student under policing. My question is straight to the commission, more especially Mr. Tepo Madlingozi, Commissioner Tepo Madlingozi. Yes. As a young man, since we've noticed the commission of Zondo Commission, July Unrest, what I wish to know is that did the commission check on the issue of this investigation, more especially because there was a July Unrest because of the former president who, that is alleged that he didn't respect the Zondo Commission. In that Zondo Commission, is it the former president alone who did that thing of disrespect. Because there is a name, even though I'm not good on pronunciation, I'm sorry for that, I'm a typical Zulu, of Baker Kos, if I'm not mistaken. The man is free, not attacked by anyone, by media, by social media, by anyone. My second question is that is on equality when it comes to attacking cases or attending cases. I wish to speak about corruption in this country and crime. When I go to corruption, money laundering is part of corruption. Money that is alleged, that is alleged that the Guptas, the former president, they've eaten in the country. It's also corruption. I'm not sure. I'm sorry for mentioning names that I'm going to do now, but there was a time when this story of dollars and Palapala, we saw a video of people stealing wrong money in Palapala. And as a policing student and graduate, their level of investigations, you can't take, as an investigator, a case to court without direct witnessing and tangible evidence. But what you have seen, what you have realized and you have seen, we are living in fear that something can happen to us if we're not favorite of individuals. Because there is a man who's from prison without a case number. I'm not supporting him. And also there is a man who disrespected the Zondo Commission, but is not attacked by anyone. I'm not sure what the level of disrespect on disrespecting Zondo, on not coming to him. Is it different? How do they weigh those things? My last question, I'm sorry for being long, is on when there are these community imbizos. I think even though it might be before I was born, but we read and we get information from elders on laws that are guiding us. There were times whereby they are saying colonizers were in charge. There's a time before colonizers arrive in South Africa or Africa. And also, there is current time whereby all those things has happened, and then we're having history that we are referring on. The time when they go for constitution and negotiations, which mechanism they use to come with the constitution that we're using as the Roman Dutch constitution? There were no laws that they were using before the land was taken or power in this country was taken. Maybe if sometimes our politicians, our leaders can focus on that because now it's 30 years of democracy and the violence is still high. There's no peace. There's a lot of inequality. Can we change the constitution and use the constitution or laws that are in line with the culture of the indigenous people? I think.
Good day, everyone. My name is Hanan Lefa, and I have a question for Mr. Morema, who was talking about the role of student organizations. Yeah, the roles of student organizations, where he talked about making ICT better. I forgot the word, and as well as making unemployment less. But in what I've seen in articles and also, IT results in unemployment rates increasing. So my question is, how do you say we go about reducing unemployment whilst increasing IT and robotics and such? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kariso Mampa. I'm a master's in engineering student here at TUT. And I'm also an unemployed graduate. But I'm not going to be crying about unemployment today. But I'm going to touch on the issues of what we face as youth that are trying to be solution providers. Right. So I think for me, it talks to leadership. Our leadership, for me, are too old. They don't have the energy, they don't have the drive. Even when they walk, they can't pick up their legs, you know. It's a problem because they are causing a delay in implementing solutions that could solve the problems that we face, right? So just to touch on some examples, right? I was fortunate enough to be part of an internship in 2021. I was working in a mine as a metallurgist in training. So it was very easy for me to identify opportunities that were created by the after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, where I realized that when I got in, there were some unreliable supply of some components that we need in those mining industries. Now, when I started to do my research, I found that with that specific steel component, we only have one local manufacturer, which can't serve the whole market, if I can put it that way. Then, doing further research, I then got to realize that we actually have all the raw materials that we need locally. Through the consultations, in a nutshell, we're able to create a feasible business case, right? Now, going to these institutions that are supposed to help us with the implementation of the solution that would create opportunities. Yeah, there's been a lot of red tapes. There's been a lot of gatekeeping, which is causing delay in having solutions. Another one is an energy project that I'm spearheading, right? So with this one, it's also a localized solution, because as a metallurgist, it is very important for us to realize the true worth of our minerals by being able to expand in the manufacturing value chain of our raw minerals. Now, with this specific project, I was again fortunate enough to participate in 2 global competitions, where one from the western side is the Milken Motsepe Green Energy Prize, of which I was selected as the top 20 globally in terms of innovative solutions that are affordable and reliable and offer sustainable solutions. And then on the other side, I participated in the BRICS Young Innovators Prize, where I made it to the finalist, right? So this is a solution that was globally recognized. Now, coming back home to find institutions that can help continue to build, test, analyze, and build this technology, it's been a hurdle. And this is, okay, with this one, it's over here. With the foundry plant, it's from late 2021, and we're still busy with all those hurdles, the red tapes, the gatekeeping, and we're still busy with that. So I think for me, leadership is a challenge. And as the commissioner said, in terms of the report, they had recommendations. They submitted to 9 institutions. They only received 2 positive feedbacks, meaning we are excelling. We are excelling in not responding. That's a distinction, by the way. 75% have not responded. We're excelling in not responding. We're excelling in not implementing and creating tangible solutions that can speak to us now. So with that said, thank you. It's not a question. I don't know if anyone would like to touch on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there were a number of questions not addressed to specific people. So what we'll do is Professor Mavhlungwas will have the first question. Ndumiso's question, part 1, relating to the Zondo Commission and whether the former president was the only person who disrespected the commission. Perhaps that could also go to you, Commissioner. The second question relating to corruption and money laundering. The dollars and Pala and the video will also hand over to you. The community in Bizo, the question of whether the constitution should not be amended to reflect the culture of people now. Perhaps if we can hand that to Nomza Mozondo. And then the reflection, I'll just say, Ozizwayo can reflect on the reflection. And then there was the direct question to Tato, which will be then answered by Tato. I think that's just for round one, and then we'll come back for round two for questions.
We'll come back to the second question. This was the first round. We'll come to the second round of questions. Sorry? Okay, no, we are together. No, first of all, let me thank the panelists. I think all the contributions were, to the point, direct, and very insightful. So thank you so much for those reflections. To the questions, there was a question about the witch hunt and the issue of healing, especially of not just the youth, but also so-called grown-up youth. Youth and Dal, that's what they're called. Yes, I was in the university space for a long time. You will think universities are spaces of dialogue and debate, but too often we see witch hunt, we see marginalization, we see suppression. And for us as a commission, we go back to what we are proposing in terms of shine. You are quite right that we can talk about structures and systems and the constitution and the laws. But ultimately we need to heal as South Africans, all of us. There's no black family that has not suffered trauma, intergenerational trauma. Trauma of unemployment, trauma of migrant labor system, trauma of poverty, trauma of relocation and displacement. All of us have suffered trauma. And I think as a country, we've not done enough in terms of acknowledging, number one, that we are traumatized people. I mean, how do you make sense of the level of corruption that we have? Not just corruption, people steal money and display their theft. Very crass materialism and display of opulence. That's a traumatized people, doesn't make sense. People stealing money that was meant for, PPE in COVID. People stealing money, from funerals, including of Mr. Mandela himself. So really we are traumatized, and that trauma manifests in the violence that, Ms. Zondo was talking about. It manifests in lack of understanding. So we are saying, as a first step in shine, the need for all of us to self-reflect. Or if we put it in other terms, the need for all of us to undergo a process of mental decolonization. Mental decolonization. We've got leaders who are still colonized mentally. And because they're colonized mentally, they reproduce the system of oppression. So we've got black leaders who perpetuate racism. We've got women who perpetuate sexism. So all of us are not only traumatized, we have internalized racism, patriarchy, ableism, and so forth. So before we can talk about, the need for new leaders, the need to change systems, the curriculum, there's a need for all of us to heal and to dismantle those internalized systems. So we acknowledge that. That's why we come up with this SHINE project. And the first leg is that first leg of reflection, individual reflection or individual process of mental decolonization for all of us. Number two, we have proposed this diversity training that my office and the SHINE project are doing. And the diversity dialogues or diversity training go to this issue that there's a need for us to understand each other's diversities in universities, in workplaces, and so forth, including us in the commission. Us in the commission, we have not been trained in diversity, so we are also not fit for purpose. So all of us need to, and that's one of the issues, Mr. VC, that I'm going to be proposing for our MOU, the need for diversity training. Because you are quite right that, we are seeing, even in spaces that are supposed to be the beacons of dialogues and dissent, repression and witch hunt. So that's the first thing that we're doing. You are quite right that there's been a lot of commissions of inquiries, the Commission into State Capture, the TRC, and so forth, including our commission or our hearing. And one of the consistent themes that sometimes come up is the unequal treatment of individuals, of people. That some people are treated differently, some are not. Now, the good thing is that our laws allows us to take those recommendations to review. And you will know that Mr. Zuma has done that. Mr. Zuma has taken the Zondo Commission, some of the findings, but also, the issue of appearance and non-appearance, and the issue of bias, alleged bias of Mr. Zondo or Justice Zondo on review. So there is that mechanism within our law that people are allowed to, if they're not happy with the finding, if they're not happy with the procedure, to take those matters into to review. And Mr. Zuma is given leadership to say, if you're not happy, take matters on review, and he has done that. And those matters are in court, that they are on review. But you are quite right, when we do hearings, when we do commissions of inquiry, it's very, very important to treat everyone equally, both by affording them the right to reply, but also to make sure in our recommendations, we apply them fairly without fear or favor. That problem is still there, and that route of review is very, very important. The issue of the Constitution is very, very important. The Constitution is not just a document that outlines rights and responsibilities and how the state should be organized. A constitution should also be a mirror of society. People should see themselves in the Constitution. In my language, you call it molaoteo. It must found a society. And therefore, where the Constitution is not reflective of people's cultures, ideologies, that needs to be a dialogue. That needs to be a dialogue. The good thing about our Constitution is that it is not a Bible, right? And the Constitution allows itself to be amended. So when people say the Constitution needs to include more indigenous thinking, that is not a swear word. It is what the Constitution allows. The Constitution says, I am a living document and I can be amended. So those people who say people should not talk like this, those are the people who are actually anti-constitutionalists themselves. The Constitution is opened to amendment. The Constitution must reflect society. And, the representative from Kausa is quite correct. We also see this at the Human Rights Commission, where people say, this Constitution that you are talking about, number one, we don't see our culture and our ideologies. But number two, this Constitution has not done anything for me in terms of materially changing my condition. So we are very, very concerned about this issue of constitutional illegitimacy. Because once we get to the point where people don't feel that the Constitution represents them, that the Constitution can do something for them, then they resort to violence, unconstitutional means of agitating for change in their lives. So the issue of the Constitution being respected is very, very important. I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
So I think the question about the change of laws, if we kind of think of the law as it was pre-colonialism, we were in a completely different setting, right? Just from the level of access, the organization of authority, the organization of how those laws are implemented was completely different. So if we start to think for ourselves, how are we ourselves governed? I think one, Prof. Madlingozi has spoken to it firstly in his initial address and even now, that without reparation, redress, redistribution, laws are not going to help us, right? We can have the best laws, but if at the end of the day, being born from a black family in Soshanguve means that you end up with nothing, those laws can't help you. Except if those laws are designed to make sure that they actually transition you out of that poverty into access. If those laws are going to address the property relationships in this country. And for instance, Prof. Madlingozi and I sit on very different sides of the debate around the usefulness of the Constitution. In my work on a daily basis, the communities that I represent, who are farm workers in the Western Cape, who are domestic workers across the country, who are landless people, they actually say the Constitution is the place we go when we are in trouble. Because the Constitution will tell the anti-land invasion unit that they can't burn my house and throw out my SAMP. But we are here to say that the Constitution is illegitimate. I promise you no one in the country will say, no, a Constitution that protects my SAMP from being thrown to the ground is illegitimate. But what they find illegitimate is the fact that that Constitution has protected the property of white people and white power in this country for a very, very long time, and protects even the current elite. The reason we are struggling, even to have people account for corruption, is because to an extent, they are using systems in the law that protect them. And so for me, if we're going to start thinking about changing the law, one, at this point, we are under saying a negotiated revolution. We're in a moment of compromise. What we have comes out of a compromise. We haven't set the framework for what we want to do. If tomorrow we're in a different environment where we are able to say, these are our demands A to J, and on those demands, this is what must happen. Every person who is living in South Africa has a right to the property, at least, that they occupy right now. If they have no property whatsoever, they have a right within this many years to have access to that property. We'll be living in a different system. I think in the debate about law has been central in this country, before, after. It will be central in the future. But whatever changes we'll make will have to be fit for purpose, have to be fit for the environment. And we simply can't rewind and say what was happening in 1450, because in 1450 we're in a completely different environment.
All right. To you, sir, your question is penetrable through quite a number of angles, but I'm going to take it at this. I was particularly centralized on the artificial intelligence aspect. You see, and it's good because the previous panelist, while presenting, was able to highlight that the learning material that our students are given is not compatible to what is actually expected by the employer as an end product. So you get a situation where students, children I'll take this from a primary base level, because primary, then secondary, high school, and then you get into university. You're taught how to color in animals, and then you must label diagrams, all these type of things. But other countries out there which are competing globally in the economic space are actually empowering students, especially children from a very young age, to really be involved in machinery, artificial intelligence in terms of assembly, design of robotics, things that are able to actually be competitive in today's environment. Because as much as we might fail to really acknowledge, we must accept reality for what it is, and we are slowly moving from your factory-based, human-based labor into a robotics industry. So we must ensure that the learning material that is given to our students is one that is competent enough and is really what the employer wants. You see, there's a large overflow of individuals in the less marketable career and job spaces. This is evident in most of these career spaces, whether it's law, whether it's nursing and all. So as much as the government is responsible for ensuring that there is employment, the government must create conditions that are favorable for employment. But what really comes at the core center of this whole debate is the people who graduate from universities must go into the economy and ensure that they occupy the spaces practically by creating businesses, being entrepreneurs that we need today to be able to go back into the communities and employ their fellow brothers and sisters. So what I meant by ICT being in the deficit was to really outline that we need to be more practical in our approach. We must stop centralizing focus and thinking on a mechanism of the previous industrial revolution. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. Children from a very young age, primary age, must be taught on the basics of robotics and assemblies and how to do that, instead of now being taught how to draw and color, and the next thing you know, they're expected to go on the roads and unblock potholes and all those type of things. I mean, we must really try and not even try. You see, as a young black activist, I must take pride in what my fellow black brothers and sisters are doing. So I cannot now feel proud when I live in a space and society where there is no growth, there's no development. Or the next generation, you just find people who are going to be working on the street, patching those potholes, where you can have actually big firms within these communities which produce machinery that is going to be able to competitively deal with these problems that we are experiencing. So my argument per se was that we need to teach our people, especially students in this fourth industrial revolution aspect, to be more competent and more acknowledgeable by the employer if they are not going to be employers themselves. Thank you.
I just want to come in to respond or add to the reflection on the metallurgist's point. I don't have a pen, so I didn't write anyone's name down. If you download the Unrest report, I think Bongiwe put QR codes out somewhere, but if you download the Unrest report and you look at the Department of Trade and Industry's submission, Minister Brian Patel's submission, he spoke very clearly about the hurdles that we have in growing our economy. One of them being the fact that the natural resources are here, it's then sent overseas and we have to buy back the finished products. And so we don't have enough local production. It's a huge problem. And so it was one of the recommendations that the Commission said, like, we want a timeline in terms of how are we going to increase local production, particularly in regard to natural resources that can be mined here and produced, the product produced here, so that one, we increase jobs, and two, we're not paying import costs. The second thing is South Africa has a big problem with monopolies. The one he particularly spoke about is the network. I'm forgetting the name. It sounds like a Star Trek thing. The MTN, Vodacom, Telkom, that monopoly there. And he said they've tried repeatedly to demonopolize through creating more licenses. But there's constant challenges from people who are benefiting from the monopoly. So that's another issue that we need to deal with. It's just that when someone has a monopoly, they have a lot of money, they have the resources to make it very difficult for other people to enter the market. But it is something that has been highlighted as a stumbling block in growing the economy. And then I just wanted to come in on the issue of the Constitution and amending the Constitution, just one, or laws in general. The Constitution can be amended, and I don't like the position of the Constitution as this spiritual or divine document. We can amend it, we must amend it as we evolve in society. laws have to amend, even if we fail and we learn from it and we try something else. We just should never stagnate. But laws are dependent or very useless. Laws are very dependent on the powers that are responsible for implementation. They're nothing without the people who actually have to implementation. Housing is a perfect example of the development of laws going from we can't interfere to all the way from Grootboom all the way to Blue Moonlight to say, look, now we as a court are telling you, you have to provide housing and a stipend where you can't provide immediate housing. So when we don't have leaders who implement, the law becomes very difficult and it feels very useless. So it doesn't matter if we change the law if we don't have leaders who are going to actually implement them in a way that is both in the short, medium, and in all terms beneficial to the people it's meant to serve.
Thank you for that. As you're talking,
Good day, everyone. I am Khonze Mlambo from TUT South and the law department. I almost forgot my question. Hi. My question is based on you, ma'am, Namzamo. What is it that you are doing for us, mostly youth? Because you said things about the police might kill someone and then they do not get charged, or it's a thing that for them to be charged, the SAP has to take motive. Why is it that the people like the Twalankodimo are the ones that have to take charge, and then why is it not given to us youth? Because I feel like us youth have that much power to change. Why is it that youth is not given that kind of a chance to change around the thing? I think the system needs youth, and then when we look into politics, most of the people there are elders, honestly, are elders, and then the way they treat us and the way they want to make things, it's olden days, it's way too old, and then now we're in the 20th century, everything has changed. It's more like we cannot give the youth because they do their own things, whereas our ways of living and our ways of doing things can change our lives. Thank you.
I give salutations to each and every one of you who are here. My name is Mwafrika. Okay. My name is Mwafrika. I'm gonna be short. We are facing socio-economic difficulties, and economy is brutal towards all of us. Reason behind it's because we have not yet moved out from colonial system. That is why I can stand in front of you today and say to you, unemployment is a violation to human rights. So the right to work, as it was articulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, emphasizes that the right to work. The latter speaker engaged the issue of saying that we need to engage the status quo regarding this issue of unemployment. Specifically, I'm submitting this to TUT management to say, let's have a consensus way forward towards this unemployment that we are having, and leave this misconception that we are carrying towards ourselves, and start now by supporting each other
as we are agreeing that we are facing socio-economic difficulties, let's support each other. It's a humble request, and come up with census way forward towards this situation before it can be late. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I see our fifth speaker is not here. What we will then do is, we've had the fourth. Okay, since you were so eager, I'll just do you. Okay, it seems the VC will want to also answer, and then we'll go to the final round. I'm just conscious of time, that we were supposed to finish ideally at 1. It's now 1:30. There are other service providers who are also outside doing and assisting us, who we committed to in terms of time. So while we respect the right to a Q&A, and it is a very robust discussion, if I could be indulged with just one more round, and then we'll just give to the VC. I'll come back to you. You'll be the first in the next round. Let me just hand over to the VC, and then we will give over to Mezondo.
Thank you very much. I just want to express a word of thanks to the HSRC. I've asked Dr. Banubai to do a vote. I have a meeting at 1:30. I've taken note of all the concerns raised, and I think that many of them are internal, and we will continue to talk about them, especially those that relate to us. But thank you for raising the national issues. Some of them, of course, link up with the issues that we have here. We are not an island. We are a university that is part of the country, and so we have some of the problems to address. There was a remark about studying locusts earlier, the parts of locusts and so on. I just want to say that it's important that we understand that knowledge is vast. So some people who studied the parts of locusts have ended up being biologists later on and made a connection to the use of that. Same thing with people who may think, for example, that a particular discipline is not useful. It may not be useful for them, but in the bigger scheme of things, of the way knowledge links up, there is always connections. There was once a famous South African businessman, I forget his name, Bezrov, who argued that political science is useless. But in fact, as he spoke, you realize that he is ignorant of political science himself. So it might help him to know a little bit of political science. So I just wanted to say that we live in a world where knowledges intersect and overlap. And what we need are graduates who have the ability to go and work across the various fields of knowledges. That is my comment on that particular remark. You must remember that Steve Jobs took a course on calligraphy, which for no degree purposes, actually, for non-degree purposes. And at the time that he was taking that course, he didn't quite know what it will do for him or what he will use it for. But the reason you and I have got different fonts in our computers today is because he took that class. It only dawned on him much later what the value of that class is all about. So I look forward to the MOU that we are talking about with the HSRC, because there's a lot of ways in which we can collaborate to deepen diversity, to deepen human rights culture, not just at this university, but in universities in general. And we are willing and ready to work with you as the Tshwane University of Technology.
No, we'll never do that. We'll never do that. We'll never do that. Just to say that as a Human Rights Commission, we have MOUs with almost all universities, but not with University of Technologies. And therefore, we are proposing that we do an MOU with TUT. That MOU will also highlight issues that you are highlighting so that you have access to us as the Human Rights Commission. Because some of the issues that you have raised are Human Rights Commission issues. I should not lie to you. And you will know that the Human Rights Commission did an inquiry at UNISA, for example, where UNISA was facing some of these issues, and we did, a commission of inquiry. So as the Human Rights Commission, we don't shy away from intervening in universities where there are problems. So this is my proposal, colleagues, is that can you come to us, especially the Gauteng province, and say these are the issues that you have as the students of this university, and you are inviting us to come back and attend to those issues. We will be able to do that. So let's do it that way. Let's do it in a proposed or in a proper manner, which is to say, as I said, we've done it at UNISA, we've done it at Stellenbosch, we've done it at Free State University as a Human Rights Commission, where it has led to changes at those universities. So we know that these issues are there at universities, and we are saying, please write to us, or you can come to speak to us to say, these are the 4 issues. Can you come back and facilitate a dialogue between us and management, or not a dialogue? We've got this human rights complaint. Can you come and investigate? We'll be able to do that, certainly. But mindful of time, Ms. Mbeki, maybe we can stop here unless there was a burning question that you wanted to answer. And let's do it that way. Let's meet with, who are you with? Are you alone? Yeah, with the team from Johannesburg, from Gauteng, not Johannesburg, and say these are the issues that we want the Human Rights Commission to come back on and attend to as far as human rights issues at this university are concerned. We'll be able to do that, certainly. We don't shy away from doing that. But as a way forward, the VC had mandated someone to do the closure. So can we have that closure, and then can we have the refreshments outside? Yes, and then we can do refreshment. But thank you so much to the panelists from our side as a Human Rights Commission. As I said, all the presentations were spot on. I wish you had written them down and sent them to us, because really they were rich insights that we need to take forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Program Director. Mine is the less contentious part of the program. I was asked to say thank you by the VC to TUT for our visitors this afternoon and spending the entire afternoon with us. So I would like to thank the HRC for choosing TUT to do the launch. And I think I fully understand the reason of your choice. The VC started with the People's University, and I've always seen TUT as a microcosm of what's happening in the country on a larger scale. Thank you for all the presentations and all the presenters for the hard work you've done behind the scenes. It is appreciated. Thank you to our students, our awesome students who are our future leaders, who need to take the struggle forward, because in every society, in every generation, history has taught us the struggle never ends. It's a continuation. And the robustness of your discussions and your questions here this morning, or this afternoon, from this morning, shows your interest and keenness to fix some of the social ills and the many challenges we have in our country. I also would like to say a big thank you to the marketing team, the Directorate of CAM, for the organization and the planning done behind the scenes to make this event a success. The fact that we are here beyond the program time really shows that we are here because we have a commitment to human rights. I want to thank you and wish you a peaceful and blissful weekend. And I do not want to stand between you and the lunch that was provided. So please, all I can say in conclusion is, let us be empathetic and show understanding to one another. When I see you as a human first, because that's what we all have in common. Thank you so much and have a good weekend.
Thank you.